Hello, everyone, and welcome to Celebrating Cinema, a podcast for the love of cinema. I'm your host, Hugo Emmerzaal, and I'm joined today by Laura Gommans.
Hello, hello.
And producer Elliot Bloom.
Hello, hello.
If you love what we do at Celebrating Cinema, you can show your support by leaving us a review on whichever platform you listen to us. It helps other fellow cinema lovers find us. But before we're going to dive into all of the films of today, Laura, I wanted to ask, what films did you watch most recently?
The other day, I was at the premiere for Baby Girl with Helena Ryan present. She's amazing. I loved it. I kind of knew that I was going to love it because I've kind of loved everything she's done so far, and I think she's one of our great talents, and I'm sad that she left to Hollywood, but I'm also so excited that she left to Hollywood. I thought it was an incredible exploration of, female sexuality, but also power dynamics, and, the two leads, Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson, are both so incredible, so sexy, animalistic, really let it all go. They left it out on the field. It was really, truly incredible. I really liked it.
Yeah, I saw it in Venice and I was completely blown away by it as well. I love it so much. So I'm very excited to see that other people in the Netherlands are enjoying it as much as I am.
Yeah, because you never know what the Netherlands are going to do with their own talent. It's either when you make it, you suddenly suck and everyone hates you. But I really feel like everyone appreciates our great, glorious leader, Helena.
That's so true. Now, how about you, Elliot?
I watched Sean Baker's Anora, and I have to say I actually really liked it. I think it's
controversial opinion.
No, it's very a sweethearted film, and it sort of had this 60s. I think just he played with your expectation of it. You expect it to be some kind of classic action gone wrong kind of film, but it turns out to be sort of this dark comedy of three kidnappers who sort of don't want to be kidnappers and sort of how that entails. So I found it very fun.
Amazing. I recently saw the winner of the International Documentary Film Festival Amsterdam, ITVA, a film called Trains, a Polish archival documentary film about all these shots taken from the 20th century of trains, which doesn't sound that exciting, but it's very interesting how it presents it in a chronology and the way that trains are being used as well. First, they are these machines of wonder and modernism and, the speed of society. But of course, at some point, they are being used during the Second World War. They are part of the infrastructure of the Holocaust. They are also part of the liberation of Europe through the Soviets and the Americans. So you see this entire basically story of Europe unfolding through the perspective of the trains and the train tracks and the stations. And it's done in such a dreamy, enigmatic, beautiful way where you get a big insight in this historical episode. But then at the other hand, it's also just kind of this insane, vibey, hangout, archival film. It's very beautiful, and I think it's a very deserved winner of the film festival.
Oh, that sounds like. Does it touch at all on how now we're all just annoyed that trains are always late?
Well, that's the good thing about ideally cinemas. Usually they play their films, even if they're about trains, on time.
But Hugo, why have you gathered us here all today?
I think we can dive in with my not-so-cold open. Fans of the show know that I have somewhat lost my appetite for a certain type of art house movie. The decent, solid, focused type of film that adequately addresses some kind of issue, depicting its themes and issues in a way that feels too neat, too clean, too controlled. Give me instead the messy stuff, the chaotic films, overly ambitious cinema that tries to do everything at once. Give me filmmakers that fuck around and find out, that try to have their cake and eat it too, that try to test the limits of the medium, and doing so also try to transcend the limits of themselves. I love films that shout, that cry, that scream for attention, that fight for their place in the world, and try to overwhelm you with their raison d'être. Cinema is a blunt tool, and it should hit you on the head, its impact leaving you in a daze long after the credits have rolled. Is that too much to ask? So picture my delight when at the last edition of Cannes Film Festival, Francis Ford Coppola's long-gestating Megalopolis finally premiered to much fanfare. Here's a film that is decades in the making, that is completely self-funded by its megalomaniac director, and that looks and feels unlike anything I have ever seen before. To explain what Megalopolis is about would already be too much. It's a film about everything, about architecture and ideology, about theater and politics, about love and loss. It stars Adam Driver as an architect who wants to design the utopia of the future while the current political order is collapsing. And for some inexplicable reason, he can stop time, but only because he is in love. There's some Cold War stuff peppered in the script, some Shakespeare too, and some idiotic scenes that are not necessarily good, but did leave a huge impression on me. It is a modernist 20th century piece of art with sweeping gestures about what a mess the 21st century has become. There's traces of the brilliance of cinema legends like Fritz Lang in there, and some vibes very much akin to George Lucas' Star Wars Episode II Attack of the Clones. It's the film I can't stop thinking about because there's so much of it. Coppola put over $100 million of his own money, his profits from his Coppola wine brand, into the production of this movie so that the film could be entirely his. Even if the film is a disaster for most, it is a triumph for independent filmmaking, an impassioned plea for a form of total cinema, completely unrestrained and free in spirit. The film made me think about all of these odd and ugly ducklings of film history that have defied conventions and shook audiences at initial release, but have slowly and surely amassed the kind of cult following that forms the backbone of a true cinema culture. And in this episode, we will discuss some of these films, and for good reason. I am programming a couple of them in the I Film Museum in Amsterdam to celebrate the feats and follies of the madman of film history that have defied expectations and have left audiences confused in their wake ever since. It's time now to celebrate the megalomaniac film in all of its messy glory. And what a better way to do that right here and right now in this podcast that's all about the love of film in all of its facets.
Wow. We love it.
So today we're talking about megalomaniac films. We're talking about Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, but we're also talking about a couple of films that I have basically dragged into that discursive space. Films in film history that have also kind of transcended maybe the limits of their own medium, their own format, their own story. Some of these films I'm screening in including Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which is one of the biggest inspirations for Megalopolis as well. This 1927 epic sci-fi film from the Weimar Republic. We're also going to talk maybe a bit about Jacques Tati's Playtime, a beautiful 1960s film that's also all about human beings getting lost into the modernist architecture of the 20th century. We have Southland Tales by Richard Kelly, probably the best film made about America post 9/11. And then we have one of my films that is very close to my heart, one of my favorite films, which is Speed Racer by the Wachowski sisters, which is just such an insane and zany Hollywood film, unlike also anything I've ever seen before. So there's a lot to dive into here, a lot of different films, but I think first and foremost, it would be good maybe to, Laura, trace a little bit our receptions to Megalopolis.
Go. Now, from visionary writer and director Francis Ford Coppola, comes an event nothing can prepare you for.
Imagine today's society as a branch of civilization about to reach a dead end. Is this way we're living the only one that's available to us? My plan is a city that people can dream about.
Megalopolis.
What about those standing in your way?
Power the people!
Who like it the way it is?
People don't need dreams. People need help now. Don't let the now destroy the forever. We're in need of a great debate about the future.
Enjoy the show.
1, 2, 3. Yippee yay.
I really love that film. I think that's very clear from my cold open as well. But what was your reaction to the film that you saw?
I think that the first reaction that I had to it was I was just completely dumbfounded by it, where it was just kind of like the entire film I was watching it and I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, truly, Jesus Christ. Which I think is also the intention. And I saw it in a packed screening and, you know, you could just hear people go, what? And I walked out of the screening and I just like fell into this slurry of people who were like, and what was that? And there were like 12 storylines too many. And I fully agreed with everything, but I can't help but like, to speak in internet terms, hold space for it. I am obsessed with it. It is terrible. I hated so much of it. I loved so much of it. And when a movie does something like that to me, I can't help but root for it in a way. I did think some things were absolutely terrible. It looks like the CGI was awful. Like it looks like that meme of like society if ... You know, it's like a very 2000s kind of
slick kindness. Yeah.
I thought some of the actors weren't good, but I thought Adam Driver was amazing. Aubrey Plaza was amazing. Like there were so many things about it. It's like it looks like I'm watching 12 different films, and it's as you mentioned, it's trying to say 12 different things as well.
Let's not forget that Aubrey Plaza's character in the film is called Woe Platinum.
Wow, Platinum. What a name.
What a name. Why not? I completely identify with this. When I saw this film in Cannes, I was just kind of completely shook. Like, this is also apparently how you can do it and you can get away with it. And this is also exactly, I think, the reason that we're having this podcast episode and that I'm doing this film program is that these films that are somewhat miraculously between a 1-star and a 5-star films are just so incredibly fascinating. Like,
And yet, however, not at all a 3-star film.
no, exactly. They are never really a 3-star film, or you have to be very nuanced in everything that you do to be like, yeah, Megalopolis, that's a nice 3-star movie.
It was fun.
But maybe we should start by defining what is a megalomaniac film for those that might not know.
Well, like I referred to in my opening, I think there has to be something very impassioned to it. You have to kind of sense that the filmmakers put in everything that's inside them seemingly into this film, that almost the film kind of like exhausts itself with ideas, and those could be thematic but also formal and visually. Like Laura rightly says, there's like 12 storylines maybe in Megalopolis, and all of them are kind of like fighting for your attention. It's a lot. But all these storylines are trying to do some really big things as well. For instance, Coppola has been walking around with this script for almost 4 decades, and the entire idea was to basically answer some of the biggest questions of the era, like how much faith do we still have in humanity and democracy and our current political system as this kind of like tool that can keep us all in shape? What happens in the wake of its collapse? What's going to be the future of humanity if everything that we've built up together will suddenly cave in? These are huge questions, and the biggest kind of like invitation that Coppola wants to do is ask the audience as well, what would your vision of the future be? What would you like to see happen in the future? And these are huge things to ask of an audience as well, and huge things to put into a film. So this is, I think, a good starting point for the megalomaniac films that are maybe trying to do too much at the same time, but it is in this almost naive ambition that they become so endearing and special, right?
Totally. So this is something that I feel like Hugo and I talk a lot about, like over beers and stuff, because very often I will hate a movie and Hugo will like a movie. This has been established. But then, like, Hugo, how do you decide whether a movie that is taking such a big swing is like good or bad? Like, how do you decide if it's like a magnum opus or a flawed masterpiece kind of thing?
That's an amazing question. I mean, if you look at the films that I'm programming, which are, you know, ranging from almost a century ago to films that are a bit more recent, like Speed Race and Southland Tales, time can only usually tell, at least if we're judging it from the critical consensus that's forming around these films. But very often these films were misunderstood in the time that they were being released. Southland Tales, for instance, is a very messy, insane film about American politics after 9/11, showing basically the kind of like fever-like insanity that America slipped in this new war on terror age, showing also all these political fault lines, the way that the entertainment industry is rallied around it, how basically everyone is in a collective delirium. These are huge things again. And when the film got released, a lot of people didn't see it because they were still in the midst of it all. These films work as a kind of diagnosis of the time in which they're being made. Metropolis, for instance, by Fritz Lang, is a film that was made in the 1920s and captured already this frenzied energy that was taking shape in Germany at that time. This violent modernity that was basically forming the 20th century for people in real time. And we, of course, all know what happened shortly after in Germany, following the 1920s, with the rise of Nazism in the wake of this completely, let's say, overwhelmed and collapsed democratic society.
Yeah.
These films become this kind of like diagnosis tools, and usually takes some time for an audience or for historians or for critics to truly grasp what it was they were hinting in, because they're so embedded in the times in which they are being made.
Totally. I can totally see that for something like Southland Tales, where when you look at it now, it almost feels prophetic for the current times that we live in.
Yes.
Like maybe at the time it was just too big a swing, and it is a really fucking weird movie, I have to say.
It is really weird.
But everything about like, oh yeah, the celebrities and the politics and everything is, if you look back on it now, it's like that wasn't only that time, it's way more true even now.
Yeah. When
So-
you see like when people are still very confused about this like Trumpist era in which we are in, and you would show them Southland Tales, which is a film that is made 10 years prior to the first Trump presidency, you can immediately draw a line and form a connection between these two moments basically in the 21st century. In the case of Megalopolis, you know, how to judge this film, again, only time will tell. And then also, it's a matter of taste and sensibility. Like I said, I love it when a film becomes insane and when a film is also driving me slightly insane. So I am very sensitive to these things. But if you need a film to be cohesive, if you need to have an internal logic that dictates everything, if you need a, let's say, conventional aesthetic to tie everything together, you're going to hate it, or you're going to be just completely confused and kind of left wondering, why did I even watch this in the first place? Yeah, so I remember very well when I saw the film in Cannes, and afterwards I was talking with a lot of other film journalists, that I was just kind of surprised by how many people like strongly, like very strongly disliked it, actually hated it. And that made me just wonder, like, are you not curious? Are you not interested in seeing things that are completely different, that feel different, that are unlike any of the other films that are playing at this festival? And I just found it so profoundly sad almost. Where's this curiosity anymore in films? Why are we not in wonder and somewhat in awe of this maybe magnificent failure, but at least it's magnificent, right? This really struck me very strongly. Maybe that's also why I like the film even more, that it also elicits this kind of reaction of people.
Yeah, I think as an audience, we're perhaps too catered towards things that are familiar and safe. And so when people take a big risk, there's this sense of this isn't supposed to work already before we're watching it with the mindset. And so we're looking for things that are wrong with it. But then I often find that some of the filmmakers that we're touching on, these are very, very big swings. And I question why they're making such big swings. And for me, that often is responding to a lack of any kind of commentary within culture at the time of responding to their times. For instance, Metropolis, as you said before, is responding to the rise of fascism in Germany. And then with Megalopolis, it's a great question again of Francis Ford Coppola speaking towards the fall of an empire, because he directly tries to correlate the fall of Roman Empire and the fall of America's empire, which he suggests is inevitable if you look through history. But I wonder what you think about how we need these big films in a way to take such a big hit, because there is a lack of people within cinema willing enough to talk about it in a way that is perhaps not safe or that goes against the grain.
That's such a good point. And, you know, for me, cinema is just such an interesting and strong medium, because it can say a lot of things very explicitly and also invoking a lot of things that are maybe not explicitly put in there, but kind of like capture the sense of dread, the energy of a time, that are almost impregnated with some of their most like subconscious but very scary feelings that we also have. And maybe it is the zany, wild, out there artist that is more in tune with these things and actually manages to translate that to what is essentially a very bulky medium. Because to make a film, you have to show a lot of things. You have to actually recreate things. People have to act it. You have to write it out. You have to film it. Cinema is also an incredibly annoying medium to evoke the feelings of what we're going through, the times that we are living in. And so maybe we can compare some of these filmmakers much more to a poet, even though that sounds awfully pretentious, or a painter, in the sense that they are actually trying to do something either very impressionistic, or in the case of Metropolis and Fritz Lang something very expressionistic, but at least they are in tune with these kind of like ideas of art in modern times,
Yeah.
where the art in itself, the piece in itself, evokes the times in which it is made. And yeah, maybe that is also why they are, met with such disavowal sometimes and with such critiques, because in many cases of these filmmakers, the filmmakers were almost punished for making these kind of films, right?
Yeah, because that's an interesting thing when we talk about Southland Tales, for example. It's by Richard Kelly, who made Donnie Darko.
Exactly.
He made Southland Tales, which was a huge swing. Then he made one more movie, The Box, but it kind of feels like he was almost put in director jail after making Southland Tales. And what I'm wondering is there even room, because you're talking about cinema as an art, and we all agree that it's an art, but it's also a product in this day and age. And are studios even willing to gamble on it anymore? Because obviously Francis Ford had to make it completely with his own money. Is there even room for artists to really explore these kinds of films in the current studio system?
Who are you to spend all of these millions of dollars to make this thing that will make people uncomfortable about the fact that they have watched it, right? This is just such an interesting proposition.
Oh, we need proof of concept. Like we need to know that this is going to bring in the big bucks.
And this is also maybe then, in some cases, some of these films will definitely not push the envelope and will be in some ways a sidestep or a fluke almost of film history. But at least they try to push something forward beyond the threshold of comfort. And yeah, I, for one, am always very enthusiastic about the idea of being put in a discomfortable position by a film or a filmmaker. This is for me one of the biggest pleasures of going to the cinema. But yeah, this director's jail thing is just, it is a very critical aspect of it, that if you do these big swings, a lot of risks are involved as well. And it's true, yeah, Coppola has managed to completely self-finance his thing, so he has complete authorial control. Also in Cannes, for instance, there were a lot of critical questions during the press conference, like, are you even happy with the film that you make? What do you think about it yourself? But then he was like, well, I'm an old man. I made a lot of money. I used my money to make the film that I have dreamed of making for over 4 decades. I am very content with myself. And I love this. It's a huge flex
Love
on the
that for
haters'
him.
bait, basically.
Yeah. I wonder how we'll look back on Megalopolis even in 5 or 10 years' time, because
Yeah, me too. I wonder how it's going to age.
yeah, maybe as fine as his very successful wines.
Some of them, which are quite good, some of his wines.
Yeah,
That's true.
But because with Southland Tales, it came out in 2006, and if I'd watched it then, I probably would have thought, what on earth is going on? This doesn't make any sense.
These are the sordid tales of how it all came crashing down.
This is an epic Los Angeles crime saga.
And you're researching your role?
Yes, it takes place in the near future.
Scientists are saying the future is going to be far more futuristic than they originally predicted.
You're gonna have to wear a bulletproof vest.
Let's talk about your film. What's it really about?
Yes.
They're listening. They're watching. Take him down.
You're not really here.
Don't look so scared, Mr. Centauros. The future is just like you imagine.
Can you try to explain what happens in the film, Elliot?
Good luck.
Yeah, this is a very unfair question because it's absolute chaos, but it's made in 2006, but it's set in the dystopian future of 2008, right? Where there's sort of environmental crises, political downfall, sort of all these things, and you have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson playing a boxer, who I have to say, it's probably my favorite role of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
100%.
For sure.
Because he plays this very absurd character that is very out of his comfort zone, but he seems to thrive in it very well. He has they're sent forward in time, right?
Yeah.
He's this famous actor who then became a police officer, and he's sent forward in time, but only by 10 minutes or 10 seconds. It doesn't make sense. And
Also,
then,
trigger warning, Justin Timberlake is in it.
In a very fascinating role.
Well, as a narrator, just as a constant narrator. But yeah, it's just weird mix of time traveling with an idea to take down capitalism, but it doesn't really make any sense. But you have to watch it for it to make sense for you, I think, because it's not, for me, it didn't really feel much about trying to understand the plot, but what it was trying to say in these different moments of putting like capitalism against Marxist communists who are trying to fight in the streets and this kind of stuff, and how people with amnesia are trying to deal with remembering things, and then also the law enforcement and all this stuff. But
renewable energy, and like there's so much in it.
But then like to watch it now in this moment, it feels as chaotic as what we're used to seeing on the screen. So it just made total sense in a way to see it. And it's also I liked how like it tells the first 3 parts of the stories just through like, we were talking about how it's very hard to put digital screens within a screen, but it tells like first 3 chapters through like this kind of graphic novel formula of just putting a screen on in front of you and then going through all these quick flurry of pictures with narrations.
Yeah, it's like an onslaught of a film, and it's interesting that you mark on this aspect of time, by the way, because if you take Southland Tales, which has this time travel narrative, if you take Megalopolis, like I said,
I noticed so many similarities between the two, actually.
And if you take Megalopolis, where you have this aspect of Adam Driver as this architect freezing time to kind of have control over the city, which is of course also what a filmmaker does, is like playing and stretching or compressing time, unfolding it in the way that they see fit. You could also even apply that to one of my favorite films in this row, this Murderer's Row, Speed Racer by the Wachowskis.
Racing's everything. For my family, it isn't just a sport. It's way more important than that. It's like a religion.
Are you ready to become a real race car driver? Then sign that contract.
He's just trying to scare you, son.
What you do behind the wheel of a race car has nothing to do with business.
You walk away from me, you walk away from this deal, no matter how well you drive, you won't win, you won't place. I guarantee you right now, you won't even finish the race.
You think you can drive a car and change the world? It doesn't work like that.
Maybe not. But it's the only thing I know how to do, and I gotta do something.
Which is a film, it's an adaptation of an anime about this young kid called Speed, and he's a racer. The film is called Speed Racer. And he has to compete in this like very insane Mario Kart-esque, but a bit more violent derby races. And he also is missing his brother, who has disappeared and was a very talented racer as well. But the film is very much about the control and flow of time as well. It's this also, again, hyper-capitalist, evil kind of society where there's a big conglomerate, this company that is ruling over these races as the main source of entertainment for the people, and he needs to complete this race to, you know, save his family, blah, blah, blah. There's some big stakes. But ultimately, it's a very endearing and naive film about self-actualization in the face of all of these oppressive elements, and the only way to do that is to completely hone in on yourself and be the most complete and full version of yourself that you can be. And there's this one tremendous sequence in the film. It's a film made also with, this is also a film that thing that some of these films have in common, insane CGI stuff.
Oh my God,
where
yes.
he just completely focuses in on this race, and all of these flashes of previous episodes of the film come to our protagonist Speed while he's racing. And it is so beautiful, so painfully poignant. Every time I see it, I cry, even though it's kind of like this very colorful, sugary kids movie as well. It's, for me, one of the best representations of this kind of like rising to the occasion and being your true self. Again, this is a film made in a style, in a form, with a kind of frenzied energy that people didn't respond very well to.
Like stylistically, it's so fun. Like it really, when we're talking about big swings, like this, not only in the content of the film, it takes big swings, but it also, like visually, it's incredible. It almost looks like we're all kind of the same age. Lazy Town, remember?
Yes, exactly.
It's like super like colorful, and it's a very like representation of like anime, like the most true to life anime thing. And it's so
like
unique.
a live action cartoon.
Yeah,
it really is. It almost looks like Spy Kids at times.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm very obsessed with the film is this film came out in 2008. It employs a lot of like green screen CGI technology, just like Megalopolis does. This is the same year where Marvel's Iron Man came out, which I would say, you know, dominated kind of like really set the tone for the mainstream visual style of digital cinema for the next generation, decades to come almost. So Speed Racer for me points to an alternative as well. It's like a forking path, a what if of film history, where there was a brief moment where you could envision that the future of digital cinema could look like Speed Racer, like this bubblegum anime explosion of colors and flurries of images, which is joyful and beautiful and has a lot of personality in every single frame that's poured into this movie.
Really
instead we got this kind of like grim, kind of like slobbish take on hyper reality, which for me is just such a disappointment. Why do we need hyper reality in cinema when it is the dream factory ultimately that we're working with, right?
I found it surprising that Speed Racer had the budget that it did at the time. It was reported 120 million.
Yeah.
And it didn't require the Wachowski sisters to invest their own money. So this was given the chance to buy studios.
But again, it's a huge swing, and for many people, they would consider it as a miss. And if you take the career of the Wachowskis afterwards, okay, they made Sense8 for Netflix, which was a very nice series, by the way. They made Jupiter Ascending, right?
Yeah.
Which wasn't very warmly received and was also a very strange and kind of flopping film. And then Lana, I think, returned to The Matrix with Matrix Resurrections because she had to save it literally from the studio that tried to make an awful version of the film. And she kind of had to take control of this narrative because she was afraid of what was going to come out of it.
Do you think she was successful in that?
Well, this final Matrix, for me, is almost adjacent to these megalomaniac films in the way that it is such an out there personal expression of what she could do with this IP, this intellectual property still within the studio system. But earlier we talked about this fraught relationship between filmmakers and the studios, and you can see that they are still struggling with that a lot. So I think that's also a thing with a lot of these filmmakers have in common, that they have to fight a lot of conditions and circumstances to even get these films dragged across the finish line, which is a good analogy for talking about Speed Racer.
I think that leads us kind of to Playtime by Jacques Tati, because he actually also invested his own money, and it's actually, so at the time it was $15 million, which now in today's money is 140 million.
Insane, right?
Yeah, which is the same how much Coppola paid, but he had to finance it or mortgage his house and his studio just to get this made. And he basically built a whole kind of city outside of Paris to replicate Paris. But
it's gorgeous.
Exactly,
It's so gorgeous.
It is such a beautiful film, and it's kind of like the 1960s version of Synecdoche, New York, which is a film that I'm also going to screen in this program, because these films just have such an insane scope. And I always love it when films are about the recreation of a thing in the film itself, like building things so you can have total control over it. And I mean, in the case of Playtime, you can see the result of it, because this is a film with such immaculate framing. Like, our protagonist in the film is just a man kind of like lost in this modern architecture, and there's all of these kind of like a lot of visually funny scenes.
Almost like Mr. Beanie.
Almost like, it's like high art Mr. Bean, where he's kind of like lost in the mise-en-scène of these locations, just being basically looking for himself and for humanity in this like highly modernist, alienating world. And it is almost without dialogue, but it is incredibly poignant. It is very beautiful. It's also shot on these like widescreen, beautiful celluloid film stock, representing the film in eye as well, on 70 millimeter, and it's just majestic. So it screams ambition, but then also, apparently if you really want to do that, you have to go above and beyond to actually get these films made. You can't be complicit or just kind of be content with what a film industry is going to give you if the dream is that big.
When we're talking about big swings, this is not on the topic of megalomaniac things, but when you were mentioning Speed Racer and the way that it looks, I was reminded a lot of Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a big swing that's visually so different, narratively so different. Well, it's a multiverse movie, which so many movies are, but it is a big swing, and that was really successful. So is there hope for people like Daniels to make something that is an incredibly big swing that could still be successful with big audiences?
Apparently, yes. It's a really good question, because it's also, what I think that Daniels did very well is understand what the audience wants in all this chaos and cater very much towards that. The film is a lot of things, but it's not audience unfriendly per se. They are really taking them into account when they are, I think, working on this film. Whereas with Coppola, for instance, if we go back to him,
Yeah,
I think he couldn't care less. Yeah, it's his autonomy as the auteur. There's also, of course, some kind of critical notion that you can put here of like the male genius again, basically placing himself above everybody else.
Yeah.
But this is also for me why Speed Racer is such an important film to include in this list, because it's not only about the male genius, it's just about the genius.
Yeah.
And the Wachowskis for me are geniuses. They are some of the best filmmakers we have. But yeah, it's kind of like do you put the audience at arm's length or do you completely work towards them? Many of the films in this list don't do that. The audience has to work to get into the film instead of the other way around. And I think maybe that is also what defines the megalomaniac film.
That's an amazing point.
This is my film. It's not yours. You can enjoy it, but I made it for me. Yeah.
Go ahead and try.
I think that also, again, encourages the audiences to be more open-minded when they go into these films, rather than to think, oh, I'm watching this, so you've made it directly for me. I have to do more thinking to get to where this filmmaker has started, which every so often I quite like the challenge of trying to understand, for instance, with Southland Tales, again, what on earth is going on and what is this director thinking through each of these scenes. It's far more liberating in a way rather than being told what to think constantly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, I think there's one aspect of, for instance, Megalopolis, which works very well also in reaching an audience. It's just simply the question, if this is a 1-star movie or a 5-star movie, where are you going to land in this binary divide, right? And I think this is a very enticing proposition for an audience as well. Like, well, I'll be the judge of that. Let's find out. And also, I hope that people listening to this episode will get triggered to kind of find this out for themselves as well. Like, okay, this sounds insane. This sounds weird. This sounds maybe like too much, but I want to see where this lands in my personal taste. And what does it say about my taste as well if I find this genius or if I find this abhorrent, right? I mean, we were talking at the beginning, Laura, as well about how to wrestle with this film that has all of these things in it. But did you enjoy this process of unraveling it, of kind of like
so much? Like I've been telling you, like I'm obsessed with this film. Like I can't stop thinking about it, talking about it. I'm so eager for it to come out in the Netherlands. Like it's been long overdue because I really want to talk to everyone about how they feel about it. And there's very few movies that do that because, for example, Baby Girl, we were just like in the bar talking to people and like everyone loves it. Like everyone who's seen it, it's like, yeah, that's a really good movie. I want to have discussions about this. I want to know what you think. I want to know your highlights, your lowlights. And this is just such a broad spectrum of every emotion of like, truly, there was a man in front of me who fell asleep and then startled himself with his own fart, which really added to the experience for me.
Demented energy as well.
Just kind of like, oh, everyone's really going through it in a different way, you know? And that is, to me, what cinema is about. I think it's a terrible film, and I think it's amazing.
By the way, can I say that on Letterboxd, I started a list of films, and it's called the Demented Cinema, and it's a list in which I'm trying to collect films that have the energy as if the film itself almost has dementia, that it ceases to have a strong internal logic, that it kind of operates on this other level that is very hard to reach for us, but you can feel it somewhat in the DNA of the film, like this film is twisted and demented and kind of maybe perverted or wrong. And I'm now just so completely obsessed with this kind of films that are just...
Can I ask you, how do you decide then if a movie that does that and narratively doesn't make sense or whatever, how do you decide if it's a bad one or that it's some stroke of genius?
Well, that's the thing for me. Like the Demented Cinema in itself is not a critique of the film. Like you can have a 1-star demented movie. You can have a 5-star demented movie. For me, Megalopolis is a 5-star demented film. One of my other favorites on the list, which is a huge one for me, which played this year in Venice Film Festival, is Finalement by Claude Lelouch. He was one of the big auteurs of the Nouvelle Vague as well. And he made a film that is just so incredibly insane. For me, it's also a 1-star movie that's actually a 5-star film. So it's not like
Can you tell me a little bit more about that movie? I haven't heard of it.
So this film is so funny. I wish everybody could see it. It's a man in France roaming the countryside as a hitchhiker, stepping into cars of random strangers, and then he starts telling these lies about his life, that he's like a sexual pervert being sought after by the police, that he's a pornographer, that he's doing... Like, it's a lot of sexual innuendo in there as well. And the film kind of progresses around this. There's also some kind of like Nazi mirage stuff. There's remembrance of the, German occupation and the liberation of France on the Omaha beaches. Then also it is revealed that the protagonist himself maybe has dementia. There's all of these weird things. So basically the entire film is his hall of mirrors of his interiority, his complex psyche. And the entire film is wrapped around that. So the narrative is demented because he is demented as well.
Wow. That actually kind of reminds me of The Sweet East, which we also have a very interesting episode about, which is also kind of like these little like vignettes of her moving through the country, just going like, I'm a new person at every turn because like who gives a shit because no one knows who I am.
This film exudes some demented energy as well, for sure.
And are there any other megalomaniac films that we haven't mentioned that come to mind?
Yeah, there's some, like in the program that I'm doing, I'm bookending kind of a thing with Megalopolis, but also I'm screening this very huge and kind of very intense film called Intolerance by D.W. Griffith. Most people will know him as the director of The Birth of a Nation, which is a very famous and very racist film from 1912, which also popularized the KKK in America again, because it's a very white supremacist film. This film, already in the time when it was being made, got met with a lot of backlash, even though there was many more vocal supporters of the film, like the president at the time screened it at the White House, etc., etc. But his haters, his detractors already spotted this racism that was in the film, this depiction of African-American people. So he made a film against the haters, basically the first anti-woke movie called Intolerance, in which he asks the huge question by showing all of these episodes from human history, like from the Byzantine Empire to the story of Jesus, etc. He asks the question, where does human intolerance come from? Why are people not tolerating each other? With actually kind of pointing it towards himself, why are people not tolerating me for the films that I want to make? This film is very insane, huge sets, incredible like silent film, very long as well. We're going to present it on a beautiful copy as well. And we're going to give it, of course, a very strong contextual intro because this filmmaker is plainly evil, but it's interesting to also deal with this subject matter.
Especially in relation to bookending it with Megalopolis.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's one film that I would really like to mention because this one has a very special place in my heart as well. That's Ishtar by Elaine May. She's one of my favorite directors as well. She made like a film like Mikey and Nicky with John Cassavetes and Peter Falk. Very strong thriller, incredibly kind of like paranoid movie. And her final film was Ishtar, this road movie through the desert of Morocco with Dustin Hoffman and Warren Beatty as these singer-songwriters roaming the deserts of Morocco while some Cold War shit is happening in the background. And this film was such a catastrophic flop for the studio that financed it that it completely killed Elaine May's film career. It was her final film as well. She never got out of director's jail, which is very sad because she was one of the best to ever do it, I would say. So this is also, for me, this program is a way then to honor these kind of filmmakers that had such a huge swing and then also a very big miss and were basically just punished for it for the rest of their career, to give them back their laurels a little bit. Because with, retrospectively, this is a very tremendous and very beautiful film that says a lot about society in the time that it was being made.
Yeah. I would also like to shout out The Fool by Tarsum Singh.
Of course.
Which we did a 4K screening restoration of here at Lab, and it's sort of now getting its flowers again. But this was, again, a personal project of his where I think he invested something like $30 million.
Oh, yes.
And again, speaking of evil men, Kiliko did an interview with him and he talks about how Harvey Weinstein kind of like derailed this film by pre-screening where he got up several times to walk in front of the film and show how much he disliked this film, which apparently put off a lot of people.
Can you tell us a little bit about that movie?
Yeah, The Fool. It's a beautiful film. Like, again, very ambitious. It's like shot in over 20 countries or something, and it's all about the power of stories, which seems so simple and so pretentious at the same time, but it's all told through the gaze of a young girl who is in hospital with this man. I forget who plays him, but very good looking man.
Is it Lee Pace?
Yeah, exactly. And it's all about him telling her a story of these 5 different characters from all around the world and them going on a big adventure. But in the end, the story reveals something else. And it's just very endearing.
Visually, just
it's
tremendous.
epic.
Tremendous.
Yeah. So yeah, check out the interview Kiriko did with Tarsem. But I think something we should really appreciate about Francis Ford Coppola is his whole filmography is about taking big swings, I think. I think he's never shied away from it. I think you're also going to screen Heart of Darkness, which is...
Yeah, the documentary about the making of
I've been
Apocalypse
meaning to
Now.
see that. I'm so
made,
excited.
by the way, by his wife, Eleanor Coppola, who was in the process of dying when he finalized Megalopolis. And the film is very much also an ode to her. And it's a reflection on the grief that he was already feeling before she passed away.
Yeah, and so all I would say is to watch this almost as is like, I imagine it's going to be his final swan song of a truly great filmmaker who did not shy away from taking risks to make the movie he wanted to make.
Yeah, I think that's just a really beautiful thing. As we said, like in a time where big swings are, fewer and further in between, just like, can we take a moment to hold space and appreciate?
We need to keep holding space.
We need to keep holding space.
Maybe Wicked should be on the megalomaniac list.
I didn't know that was happening. No, we need to appreciate that this is happening, and it's okay to be upset by a film. It's okay to hate it. It's okay to do it, but we need to keep it alive. And I think that's very important to make that statement also towards the film industry. So yeah, Megalopolis is screening at Lab, as well as the other special programs that Hugo is doing.
In I.
This is going to be a very exciting time. And amazing.
Amazing. So stay connected with us at Celebrating Cinema and Lab by following @Lab111 on Instagram and Letterboxd. Check out also our last episodes on the films of German director Wim Wenders, or listen back to our discussion about another visionary director, Alejandro Jodorowsky. If you love what we do, support us by leaving a review on your podcast platform, because it really helps. And don't forget to check the show notes for all the films mentioned, bonus info and ticket links. This was a Lab 111 production, edited and produced by Elliot Bloom, music from me, Hugo Emerzaal, and artwork from Studio FFF. Thank you for listening.